Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my channel, the Podcast Nate channel, where I discuss how I took my podcast from launch to the top 5% globally in the first 90 days and everything in between. Today is part two of everything you need to know to launch your podcast and how to make it successful. Part one was numbers 1, 2, and 3. I will link it in today's video. And today is part two. Like I said, tips 4, 5, and 6. Let's get started. Okay, we are getting into the good stuff. We're finally to the point where we are recording our first episode. So, recording your first episode requires a little preparation at the front end. But if you follow these 3 steps, you can set yourself up for success and kind of take the legwork out of everything.
We believe his guy is doing the legwork for him.
Number 1, we are going to create a podcast outline. Rambling is one of the most common mistakes that new podcasters make. And the best way to fight this tendency and to sort of lay out everything that you want to cover and things that you want to say is to create an outline, not a script.
Well, this is not a script, Diana.
Even just taking a few minutes to jot down a list of bullet points will dramatically help the flow of your episode. And especially if you're talking to a co-host or a guest on the podcast, help the conversation to flow and to limit those awkward moments. If you are working with a co-host, be sure to share your outline and to go over the main topics prior to recording your episode. And of course, make sure that you have a good hook or intro so that you grab the audience's attention. They are more inclined to stay put for the rest of the episode. So here I am creating an outline for my next episode. I am chatting with a guest named Ken. He is an author. He is a contributor on the Medium and eventually help others who are in recovery as well. So I am just making bullet points of topics that I want to cover. I'm adding a few things that Ken sent in from his bio that I want to touch on. And like I said, that first hook or the intro to the episode that I want to capture my audience's attention. So again, just really quick, a way to frame your conversation and make sure you don't forget any of the good points. Second tip before you record your first episode is to pick a good place to record. You want a quiet place with no distractions and, if possible, in a room with lots of furniture, curtains or drapery, rugs or carpet. The more stuff in the room, the less echo there's going to be and the more quiet or muffled you're going to sound, which is ideal for a podcast. Noise bounces off of hard, flat surfaces. So the more we eliminate those and the less of those that we have, the better you'll sound. You can also treat your space with foam panels or soundproofing materials from an audio perspective, or just, like I mentioned, drapery, towels, extra rugs or carpet. I've even heard of people that actually record in their closet because of the clothes hanging. They can duck their head behind, their hanging clothes, and it's honestly the ideal recording space.
Do you know what it means to be in the closet?
If your podcast is going to be a video podcast, this is where it gets a little tricky because you also want a place where the lighting is good. So, if you're weighing those options, I think audio always wins because at heart, this is a podcast and the audio needs to be great. I discussed equipment in part 1 of this series. Again, I will link it today. So make sure you check that out and decide what equipment is going to be best for your setup. Okay, number 3, setting up your recording equipment and software. Of course, you are going to be hooking up your microphone and checking all of the connections, compatibilities, as well as the option of a USB versus XLR microphone and any additional equipment, cloud lifter, field recorder, anything additional that might come with using an XLR mic and its functionality on the day of recording. There's nothing worse than having all of your pieces in place, all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and you sit down and flip the switch and it doesn't work and you can't figure it out.
Flip the switch.
It's so frustrating. And honestly, I've considered throwing in the towel more than once because of failed audio equipment. So make sure you're doing your research. Make sure you know the options and functionality of your specific equipment so that you can get the best use out of it and that you are truly utilizing it and its functions to the fullest. Once everything is plugged in and powered on, cross your fingers and embark on your podcasting journey. So for microphone technique, you want to position your mouth about 2 to 4 inches away from the microphone for the cleanest sound. Of course, depending on whether you're using a dynamic or condenser microphone, again, which I touch on in part 1 of this series, the distance may vary based on the specific manufacturer of your microphone as well. So again, know the specs, know the functionality of your equipment, test things out before episode 1, and really understand what works best for your voice as well. We all sound different. Our vocal cords function different. So test it out, decide what sounds best. I always jot down the specifications of what volume am I at? Where am I talking? How much am I extending the mic stand? Once you hear and decide what sounds best, jot everything down so it's not reinventing the wheel every time you record. Take out your little notebook. Okay, I'm going up 6 inches. I'm at volume 37. Flip, ready to go. If you noticed any harsh syllables or plosives, Peter Piper picked a bunch of podcasters. You're too close to the microphone or your volume is turned up too high. So again, play with those levels, play with where you're sitting and how close your microphone is, and find that perfect sweet spot. Again, we are recording a test track either the morning of or maybe the day before your actual episode 1. So all of these volumes and specifics of the equipment involved, you're going to test out. You're going to find the sweet spot. You're going to write it down. That way, the morning of the recording, you are ready to go. Your co-host and or guest or just yourself, you're feeling confident. You know that you're set up for success and you're ready to put episode 1 behind you.
My mom always said, you got to put the past behind you before you can move on.
Of course, once we have all of the raw audio, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Raw audio. Of course, once we have all of the raw, oh God. I need to take a little breather here. Raw audio. Of course, once we have all of the raw audio finished and saved on our hard drive, next comes the editing. I use an amazing editing software called Movavi, and the Sobriety Diaries is a video podcast. So I am taking the raw video from my recordings, editing it in the Movavi software. I then finalize that file, extract the audio, save that, save the video. They sound exactly the same. One simply has the video attached to it as well for YouTube. And then I have those 2 separate files. So with editing, really what I look to eliminate are any awkward pauses, any annoying equipment related noises, so bumps with your microphone, any hissing or squealing that your microphone produces.
Come on, squeal!
any distractions in your environment. Is your baby crying? Is your dog barking? Did somebody knock at your door? Obviously, audio is king with podcasts, and you want everything to be cohesive and not distracting. I also look to insert transitions in between different clips so that everything sounds, again, cohesive and well put together and not like I have edited things out in between. So, what I do, and you can see here in Movavi, I just literally start at the beginning and go through the audio file as if I am a listener. So, if I've made a mistake and I start a sentence or a phrase over, obviously, I create a separate segment out of that, or I cut and isolate that particular part of the audio and simply get rid of it. I then go back and replay it to make sure that it sounds cohesive and put together and that you can't hear any jump in the audio in between. If you can, I do my best to cut it down more or make it sound like a natural flow in the conversation. And if I'm still missing something or hearing something awkward with it, I'll try to add a transition to help me out with that a bit. I also create a list or a punch list as I'm going through things to go back and check before I finalize and export the audio. So just like with your equipment, it's important to learn your editing software like the back of your hand. You want to make sure that you are utilizing all of the features, all of the functionality that it has to offer to really polish off your episodes to a professional level. There are so many podcasts out there, and so many people are fans of podcasts these days. They're really not going to settle for subpar audio. Again, if you go back to part 1 in this series, sorry for harping on it, but initially it was going to be one video, but it was over an hour long and I didn't want to bore you guys with that, so I made it 2 videos. So if you go back to part 1, there is a full rundown of my suggested recording and editing software. So go check that out, see what works best for you. There are some free options, there are paid options, and different price levels. So again, check that out, decide what works best for you for that professional production level. Next on our list is creating your podcast brand. This is what is going to create show recognition, and your podcast cover art is the first thing that potential listeners are going to come across on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, social media. So good artwork implies quality content, right? Buzzsprout says that 62% of new listeners are more likely to click on your show and listen to your podcast if they like the cover art. So it's the first impression of your show.
That was my first impression of the man.
Creativity and polished look of the cover art just adds to the quality of the show. So a few tips for creating your brand content. First off, of course, you want everything to be cohesive. So you want to create a short list of fonts that you're going to use, colors that you're going to use, a few photographs or graphics that you're going to use repeatedly so that your listeners or viewers on social media will begin to correlate these graphics or this brand with your show. So a few technical guidelines that your cover art should follow. It should be a square image. So think an Instagram post as opposed to an Instagram story or TikTok size. The resolution should be about 72 dpi. It should be a PNG or JPG file, which sort of creates this universal approach to be able to post it really anywhere. And again, you want to make sure that you're using your brand specific colors, fonts, and graphics. Canva is an amazing platform to develop this art and this brand recognition. Really, Canva is so user friendly and really guides you along the way for really releasing your inner creativity. Before I started using Canva, I had no idea about design or the creative aspect of brand development. And, I've been using Canva for over a year now. And gosh darn it, I think I'm an expert.
Gosh darn it, I give up.
Just a little snapshot of my Canva and developing some graphics for the Sobriety Diaries. Again, you can see here that I use specific colors and fonts specifically for the Sobriety Diaries brand and have been using them since the start. So I've been able to develop that brand recognition, which is super important. I like the sort of spray paint and brick wall feel. So you can see that carried out in a few different ways here with the different graphics. So 5 quick tips to make your cover art stand out against your competitors. Number 1, you want to visually communicate the subject of your podcast. So potential listeners should know what your podcast is about just by looking at your artwork. So too much symbolism or ambiguity can turn people away and really confuse the listener when they're looking at your graphics. Number 2, you want to design for a variety of sizes. So I said before, you want that cover art or that show specific graphic to be the square format, but you want to be able to pull that into different sizes and into different variations for different platforms. Number 3, don't use too many words or too many fonts. When we are thinking about the size of things, really, if you're scrolling Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it is a tiny thumbnail that's going to represent your show. So you don't want things to be too crowded or too crammed within that small thumbnail. So you got to think about sizing also when you're designing your cover art. Number 4, try to avoid podcast imagery. So when you are describing your show, you don't necessarily need to include podcast equipment or behind the scenes, a camera, a microphone. Side note, I don't agree with this one because I oftentimes put microphones in my cover art. Insert thumbnail here. So you can take that for what it's worth. I took that tip from our friends at Buzzsprout. So thanks for the suggestion, but I will kindly leave that one here. And number 5, again, use consistent branding. So your podcast artwork should be part of an overall brand and a feeling, again, to create that show recognition. So I suggest setting up your Canva profile, going in and playing around with different elements that they have available, deciding what colors really speak to you and what sort of imagery really represents your show. Settle in with an idea, because speaking to the fact that we want recognition when it comes to the show, you really should not change your podcast cover art really at all, because it's going to confuse people and or lose them when they're trying to find your show, or throw them off and perhaps think that you switched formats or whatnot. So when you create your cover art, you really have to stick to it. So make sure you love it. So at this point, we have our first episode recorded, edited, polished, and ready to go. We have our cover art and our brand graphics finalized. We have all of our platforms and equipment in place. We're feeling good. We are finally ready to launch. We're launching. We're ready to launch. Not lunching. We're launching. Okay, pro tip. Pro tip. You always want to launch with more than one episode. For me, the ideal number is 3. So you're launching with more than one episode to create this small library that people can sort of binge. When they find your show, it helps to create the sense of urgency, like, oh, I got to listen to the next one. This show is great. I love him. His voice is mesmerizing. Oh, I can't wait till next week. Perfect. We've got 3 episodes for you to listen to.
Oh, hey now, Bunky, that ain't an excuse to go on a binge, you know.
All of the pieces to this puzzle are finally coming together. It's so rewarding when you are uploading the different segments or your finalized audio to your distribution platform and hitting publish or schedule, whatever that button may be. For me, it's Anchor, and this platform is so intuitive. It's so user-friendly. It has tools within the app that are available at anchor.fm to do it on your desktop or as an app. So you can really start to finish, record, edit, and publish a podcast episode through the app on your phone, which is amazing. So you can see here the different analytics that it also offers, the tools that you can use. Again, Anchor is owned by Spotify, so you can use any song in Spotify's library in your podcast episodes, which is huge. They also have different transition sounds, different background music, and of course, the editing software to finalize your episode. Also through Anchor or whatever distribution platform you choose to use, this is where you dial in all of the different destinations where you want your podcast to be available. So for me, the Sobriety Diaries is available on 10 platforms. So we have Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Pocket Casts, Radio Pod. Am I forgetting? What am I forgetting? Anyway, there's 10 of them. So you want to utilize this feature and make sure that your podcast is available everywhere. So oftentimes we hear, wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Podcasts are my guilty pleasure.
We want that to be true. So make sure you set up your destinations. Sometimes that involves creating a profile on these different platforms and making sure that you are routing it correctly. And Anchor is really great about giving you step-by-step instructions to do so. So hit publish. Go ahead. Do it. Click it. Click publish. Listen, I know the hesitancy and the anxiety that comes with it. Trust me. You are going to learn and develop and perfect your process, but you've got to start somewhere. Click publish, listen to it back, learn, grow, and fix things along the way. But this is the starting point to your podcast journey. That's all for today, my friends. I hope this information was helpful. Again, check out part 1 of this video. I will link it here, and come back every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern for all the information you need to take your podcast from launch to the top 5% globally in the first 90 days, like I did with the Sobriety Diaries. Make sure you hit subscribe and the bell notification so you always catch my uploads, and I'll see you in the next one. Au revoir. Stupid. Bye.